Hi everyone. During Module 2, we will be discussing the Impressionism art movement. This is an extremely important movement in art history because it is considered the first distinctly modern style in painting. It was the rebellious artists from this movement that would help inspire future artists and the many styles and movements that followed. The Impressionist art movement began in Paris, France during the 1860s. The movement began when a small group of artists started painting in new styles that had not been seen yet. These artists were rejected by the art world and were not allowed to exhibit their work. The realism style of the Renaissance was the only style accepted at that time. It was not until 1874 that this small group of artists band together and displayed their work in an independent exhibition. By the end of the 1800s, this new style of art was finally accepted and its influence spread across Europe and eventually to the United States. The Impressionism art movement brought many new characteristics to their artwork that had never been seen before. Unlike the realism art of the Renaissance that focused on perfection and showing no brushstrokes, the Impressionists used loose, short, broken brushstrokes that were visible to the viewer. Impressionist artists began lightening their palettes by including pure, unblended colors. Instead of using neutral white, grays, and blacks like the past artists, these artists filled their paintings with bright, vivid colors. Before this movement, art depicted idealized forms and perfect symmetry. The Impressionists rejected this because they felt that was not true to life. They concentrated on the world as they saw it, imperfect in many ways. These artists began putting a great emphasis on the effect of light. They wanted to capture the passage of time, changes in weather, and other shifts in the atmosphere. The subject matter in the art that came before Impressionism was that of wealthy upper class, highly religious, and its landscapes represented beautiful scenes of nature. The Impressionists were the first to depict the everyday lives of the poorer lower classes. These artists also started including scenes of modern landscapes such as railways and factories, which would have been seen as very inappropriate to the previous generation of artists. Some of the inventions and innovations that occurred during the later half of the 1800s helped assist the Impressionist movement to start. Without these, though, the movement never would have occurred. At that time, the Impressionist movement started. Scientific thought was beginning to recognize that what the eye saw and the mind understood were two completely different things. This is why these artists began playing around with optical effects of light. They began to realize that the different usage of light in their paintings brought out different emotions in their viewers. Because of this, their art did not always rely on realistic depictions. Also, new research on color theory encouraged these artists to experiment with color more. Artists started to realize that when they placed certain colors next to each other, each would look deeper and brighter. The invention of the camera that became available to the public in 1888 made these artists believe there was no reason to paint in the realistic style anymore. They believed this was now the job of the camera. Instead, they painted how we actually see. When we look at a crowd of people or a landscape, we do not see every face or leaf in detailed focus, but rather as a mass of color and light. This is what the artists sought to capture in their artwork. During this period, the introduction of paint tubes allowed artists to leave their studio by enabling them to carry all of their equipment around in a case. Now artists could paint outdoors while observing changes in light throughout the day. This played a huge part in the Impressionist movement and is why they were able to capture such great effects in their paintings.